Now we'll move on to the meat of the presentation here, the 47 Twin Cities Zephyr. This is the dome version. Back to our 1940 timetable. Got trains 21 and 23 was northbound on the queue, and 22 and 24 southbound. So each train made a round trip each day, and you had morning departures and afternoon departures, hence morning and afternoon Zephyrs. So here's an eastbound consist leaving the Twin Cities, July 3rd, 1964. We've got Silver Tower at the end of today's train. That's one of those blunt end observation cars. Most likely, they pulled these cars off the Kansas City Zephyr, American Royal Zephyrs. You wouldn't see any of the CZ or Denver Zephyr cars on here. Those were Denver Zephyr was train number 1 on the queue. That was their most important train, and California Zephyr followed just behind that. So we've got the Q parlor car. This would have come into St. Paul in the previous day's Empire Builder. And sometimes this car did go back out the same day if it was flipped in enough time. And then you've got the Silver Mail up at the head end. This is one of the smaller Q standalone RPOs. So that would have come up on the previous day's North Coast Limited. And we've also got some X 400 cars off the Chicago Northwestern in the consist this day as well. And basically what was going on and why they did that is, the Q treated the Denver Zephyr and the California Zephyr as their top trains. So if they needed extra cars for those trains, they would pull out of the Twin Cities Zephyr pool. So then they needed cars in that pool. So then they pulled from the American Royal Zephyr, Kansas City Zephyr pool. And those were some of the older cars. They also used a lot of what they called simulated stainless steel cars, which were old heavyweight coaches that had been clad in stainless side panels to try to blend in with the Zephyrs. But they weren't as nice, and they were old, and they were the heavyweights, so they weren't supposed to be used on the Zephyrs, but they were on a lot of the times. And the Q was in a situation where they needed more cars, but they didn't want to go back to Bud to buy new cars. So it was September 1963, the Chicago Northwestern's Twin City 400 came off. So then the Northwestern had these surplus passenger cars. So the Q ended up buying 9 of those coaches, remodeled the interior, painted the sides silver, and these were added into the Twin Cities Zephyr pool and used instead of the old simulated stainless steel heavyweight cars or cars off the American Royal Kansas City Zephyr. Here's an eastbound leaving the Twin Cities July 14th, 1966. That's a pretty darn large train there. Well, this was due to an airline strike going on at this time. Another thing to note is, okay, there's your QRPO, one of the smaller ones. Wait a minute, there's Silver Tower. That's our tail car. There's our parlor car. Our train's backwards. Traffic was so heavy this day, the westbound train rather, made it to Minneapolis. There wasn't enough time to turn the train and service it and get it ready to go back east that afternoon. So they just, put the power on the other end, and train ran in reverse back to Chicago. Here we are leaving the Minneapolis Great Northern Depot. This was before the construction of the lock and dam here, I believe, which is now closed. This is a lower level view of basically the same area, except now this time we're arriving. Then I'll point out the smokestacks in the background. That's the University of Minnesota steam heating plant. We'll see that in a couple more pictures here. And that helps place where we're at. Here we have a westbound crossing the Stone Arch Bridge with the old Pillsbury Mill in the background. And you might be wondering, why do we have 3 locomotives here for only 2 cars a train? Well, the queue would have at this time, this is mid to late 60s, the queue would have been combining the Twin Cities Zephyr with either or both of the Empire Builder and North Coast Limited. And they would have dropped, they would have handed those trains off in Minneapolis, or excuse me, St. Paul. And then they would have ran whatever was left with the power back to Minneapolis, because the queue's coach yard and engine servicing facilities were located just west of Great Northern Depot. And this would be after the lock and dam were built. You can see the lock wall there at the bottom of the photo. Jumping back earlier in time, we've got the Twin Cities Zephyr leaving Minneapolis across the Stone Arch Bridge. Still have one of the EAs as a power unit with the E5B. And now we're on the bridge as the Zephyr is leaving town. And this bridge is still there. Tracks have been removed, and it's now a pedestrian bridge. You can walk across it. It's pretty neat. This is Minneapolis and St. Paul. We are eastbound, EA and E5 in the consist today. And there's those 4 smokestacks in the background. That's how we know where we're at in this photo. I also point out one of the 2 pattern domes in the train this day as well. We are coming down the hill in St. Paul in the Union Depot. Again, 4 locomotives for 3 cars. This is going to be combined with the North Coast Limited and or the Empire Builder. Sitting at the platform at St. Paul Union Depot on what looks to be a cold Minnesota day. So let's head upstairs into the concourse of Union Depot here for a moment. This is at the, these are the doors that pass into the head house area. This is the far end of the concourse. Note that sign above the door, the Zephyr neon sign. That sign still exists if you've ever been to Scale Model Supply in St. Paul. It's hanging up on the wall and it still works. Now we're down at the platforms. The hogger of the 9912 is looking back, waiting for the highball. And then you've got the iconic first, I think it's the first bank or first insurance building there in St. Paul. There's first is on 3 sides there, and they light up in red, and it just alternates which side is lit up. And based on the sun angle, we know this is the morning Zephyr getting ready to leave. The train is facing east, and we've got nose light. So a little further back from the previous picture, we're getting ready to depart Spud. And notice the bridge abutment here. That's getting ready to build the US 52 bridge into St. Paul across the Mississippi. And that was just recently replaced within the last few years. We are looking down onto the tracks. We've got the Twin Cities Zephyr on the left and the Blackhawk on the right. The Blackhawk was the overnight train between Chicago and the Twin Cities. So a lot of heavyweight cars still at this time, sleepers, coaches. Now we've departed St. Paul Union Depot. There's that GN roundhouse in the background. We've got the Minnesota State Capitol rising above the roundhouse. You can see a couple of the GN locomotives sitting just to the north of the roundhouse. Taking a look at the train, we've got one of the pattern domes first out, and then the RPO. What I'm thinking here is that the pattern dome was deadheading back to Chicago, probably for repairs or service at the car shops in Aurora. We have Silver Tower. This is one of those blunt end observation cars substituting for one of the normal cars, either Silver View or Silver Vista, passing the Northern Pacific Commissary just east of Union Depot. This is roughly the same spot, except this is trains heading westbound here. And again, there's one of those X400 cars just below the signal bridge there. On that, I was incorrect earlier. The train off date for the Twin Cities 400 was July 1963. East end of Spud once again, and then we've got a GN Express box car in the consist today. One of the pattern domes. And now we're departing, heading up the hill to go to Minneapolis. And again, one of the pattern domes. Passing under Kellogg Street Bridge. This is heading to Minneapolis. There's our GN roundhouse in the background. And this is getting later in the 60s. We've got, only 2 cars on the train, and then the unique baggage lounge car at the front. Now we'll head up onto the bridge. There's our GN roundhouse and the GN passenger power, including one of their few E7s. Then we've got the Twin Cities Zephyr. It looks like it ran separately this day. You've got 3 engines on here and a pretty short train. No parlor car service at this point. And this is June 1st, 1968. So this may have it may have come up as a combined train and then backed out and then pulled forward through the Y. So this could have been, a longer train. Departing St. Paul with a pair of E7s. And there's our silver page or silver post. High atop Dayton's Bluff, seeing the train pass through. This is the Milwaukee Road yard at the top, and then this is, it's not really yard, I don't think here. This is all interchange track. It might have been yard here at this point, but now it's just interchange track and multiple main lines for the BNSF, CP, UP runs through here. But I remember hearing a story from the flooding in 1965. The water came all the way up over the bankment here and flooded all of this out. And the tower operator here ended up having to leave by boat. We are down at ground level. This is Hoffner locking. You can't see the tower, but this was built on stilts above one of the yard leads into the Q's Dayton Bluff yard. Short train this day. Looks like it ran separate, one locomotive, 3 cars. So we're getting later in time here, late 60s. Pretty much the same location, but this is an earlier photo. We've got the E5s in the lead today. Got one of the Q's switchers on the left. I think the tower would have been just to the left of the photo here. And there's the tail end of that same train. We've got an elevated view off the overpass there at Hoffman. EA and an E5B. Something interesting to note, you've got a Q work train with camp cars on that yard lead back there. Now we're down at Oakland Tower. Oakland Tower once again, but this is from US 10, US 61. The road's a lot closer to the tracks now. It's been expanded into a 4-lane divided highway through here. We are at Dunn. This is just south of Oakland. And it's US 1061 in the background. Here we are near Cottage Grove. So pretty lengthy train this day. 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 or 6 dome coaches. Then 3 units, including an E5AB set. I threw this one in because my wife is from Cottage Grove, St. Paul Park area. Now this is a photo that I've come across multiple times. And each place I've seen this photo says it's in a different location. And only one of those is correct. Many people, or some of the captions have said, this is down in Wisconsin. The name's escaping me, but it's one of the near Victory, Wisconsin. I can't remember the rock formation name, but this is at Hastings, Minnesota. This is taken off the lock and dam at Hastings. The Q had the river level route through here. Then there's that second code line back there. That's the Milwaukee heading up the bluff. The Q and the Milwaukee operated this as joint trackage between St. Paul and St. Croix Tower. We're a little further back. This is at Prescott. This is the swing bridge across the river. This is taken from the Minnesota side, or excuse me, the Wisconsin side looking over into Minnesota, I believe. But this has been replaced. There's a lift bridge here now. Back at Winona Junction. Don't have an exact location for this one, but it's somewhere along the Mississippi. You've got the backwaters slough in the foreground. Another location that I'm not quite sure on. Here we are coming into La Crosse from the north. This is at the new depot in La Crosse, the 1940 depot below Grandad Bluff. Here we are on the platform as the train arrives. And here it is departing. And I like this photo because I like the golfers right here, just not even paying attention to the train going by. The line actually cuts right through this golf course. Here we are somewhere south of La Crosse. Again, south of La Crosse. Don't have an exact location for this one. I believe this one is near Ferryville. Here we are up in the dome. The photographer in this photo was working for the Q as a towerman, and he was riding to his next assignment at Oakland Tower and took this photo. We are at East Dubuque. Photographer's pole filter wasn't working too well this day. We are back at Portage Junction. We saw that view looking eastbound earlier from the tower, and here we are atop one of the signals looking upriver. And this would be the IC line coming in from the right. And now we've reached Savannah. Looks pretty cold out. The conductor looks pretty miserable this day. All right, let's hop on board and take a look at the inside of the train too. Here we are getting on at La Crosse. Inside one of the dome cars looking up into the dome. And then looking down from the dome. I don't know about you, but these guys are missing out taking a nap. I mean, nature smiling for 300 miles. I'd want to look at it. Looking down on a hot card game. We are up in the dome. Passing the lock and dam, I believe that's Alma. Here we are coming into Savannah in one of the pattern domes. If you're not familiar with the pattern domes, what that is the Q took one of their flat top coaches. I believe it was Silver Alchemy, ironically enough, and they built the dome. This was the first dome car that was built, and then Bud and the other manufacturers latched on afterwards and built their own versions. But the Q cars, the home built cars, were easily identifiable. They weren't as rounded in the windows, more angular. So the Q originally built Silver Dome, which is might be this car, I'm not sure, but then that gave them an odd number of domes by the time the domes for the 47 version of the train came around. So then they took another car in, Silver Castle, and did the same conversion to it. So then they had two pattern domes and an even number of domes for their trains. Both of these cars do still exist. Silver Dome is at the Mad River and Nickel Plate Museum out in Ohio, and Silver Castle is at the Minnesota Transportation Museum in St. Paul. Looking up at some of the bluffs along the way. Again, this is out of one of the pattern domes. And then I put this one in here. This is the one of the baggage lounge, bag bar lounge cars that were on the Twin Cities Zephyr. You only had two of these, and they were just on this train, Silver Salon and Silver Buffet. And both of these cars do still exist. One of them's out in Ohio at the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic, and the other one, I'm not sure what the current status is. It was one of the cars at the Indiana Transportation Museum in Nobleville, and may or may not be familiar with what happened there in the past year, but this car was moved to Logansport, and that's the last time I saw it. I don't believe it was scrapped, but I'm not sure where it ended up. So if you do happen to know, please let me know. So now we're inside one of those cars. Everyone's having a grand time having a drink. The sailor looks like he's a little schlitzed at this point. Now we're back in one of the dome coaches. We've got the mural on the back, Father Marquette and Joliet on their expedition of the Mississippi. Move into the dining car. We have the steward balancing his books. Got one of the waiters folding the linen for the next service. A couple others are enjoying a meal or reading the paper. Papers most likely would have been left by passengers. Here we are enjoying dining service on the train. And I'm pretty certain that this is a publicity photo by the Q. A couple things stick out in this photo. All the blinds are down, so this was probably taken in the Zephyr pit at Chicago. And these are probably all workers from the headquarters building in downtown Chicago. And anyone who's familiar with the Q and the Zephyrette program, this woman here on the right-hand side, that's Velma McPeak. She was the head of the Zephyrette program. So pretty darn certain this is a publicity photo. Taking a look at the menu. Again, probably a publicity photo with the blinds drawn. Here we are in either Silver View or Silver Vista, the Parlor Obs car. And this young lady would have just come up from the depression underneath the dome. So this would be the vestibule end of the car looking backwards. And we've got a route map here on the back wall. I visited the Silver View in Charles City, Iowa. Mike Abernethy owns it now, and he's been doing some work on it, trying to get it back into service. But this mural is still there on the wall. It's awfully faded, but hopefully that's able to be restored and bring it back to its former vibrance. Now we're at the dome end, or the observation end of the car, rather, looking towards the dome. And then looking back towards the round end. All right, now we'll talk a little bit about the combined trains. By the late 60s, this was the new normal. They were, pretty much everything from 67 on was combined into one train. And they did this a bit earlier. This was mainly during the off season. So during the winter, they would combine, the Twin Cities Zephyr with either the Empire Builder or North Coast Limited. But definitely in the summer seasons when the traffic was higher, they would still run separately. But as we got in the late 60s, passenger traffic was falling off, so they were combined. So here's one of those combined trains. This is January 6th, 1962. So this was a busy time. We've got the Twin Cities Zephyr combined with the Empire Builder. So we've got our Zephyr cars up front, and then it's got one of the blunt end observation cars. And then this is the Empire Builder starting here. Even though this is a Q car, this is one of the shorts coaches for the Empire Builder. So pretty long train, 4 locomotives. Here's another one from February 1962. This one, we have the Empire Builder and the North Coast Limited combined here. And lots of switching was done in St. Paul. They didn't have a lot of time to do it, but there was a lot to do here. So in addition to combining the trains, the GN Ranch, Diner, and Great Dome Lounge cars and the NP Travelers Rest and Dining cars were swapped out for freshly shopped cars. So a lot of moving parts going on at St. Paul Union Depot. Uh-oh. Looks like we've got a problem here. This is a 1965 flood in St. Paul. The Stone Arch Bridge was severely damaged during this flood and closed from April to October. So the Q had to detour their trains over the NP High Bridge a little bit downstream that ran through University of Minnesota campus, and that bridge still exists, and it's a pedestrian bridge as well now. So these are at St. Paul Union Depot looking at the river. This is Robert Street, and that's the Great Western's Robert Street lift bridge. Both these bridges are still here. UP uses that bridge every day. But I mean, look how high up on the signpost the water is. And this is looking down in the parking area underneath St. Paul Union Depot. The platform tracks themselves were fine, but then they dipped down here as they went around the Milwaukee yard, so that was all underwater as well. So we've got to get these trains to Chicago somehow. This picture came across a Facebook group a year or so ago. We weren't quite sure where it was. But this is at Altoona, Wisconsin on the Chicago Northwestern. The Q ran their trains over the Northwestern between Westminster and St. Paul and Camp Douglas. Then they went on the Milwaukee from Camp Douglas to Chicago. So that's the depot at Altoona. And then there's a bar right across the street called the 400 Bar. But depot's still there, as is that bar. They've got a nice neon sign featuring the 400 on the front. There's another one of those flood detours coming into Roundout, Illinois. That's the Milwaukee's J line branching off there to the left. Oh, we did it again here. This presentation is supposed to be about dome trains along the Mississippi, and now we're in the Chicago area. We got to get back on track here. Here we are at Dayton's Bluff. This is a combined Twin Cities Zephyr, Empire Builder, and North Coast Limited, sometime in the 1966-1967 period. So we've got our 5 locomotives up front, and then we've got our NP and GN baggage storage mail cars, followed by the Twin Cities Zephyr, then the Empire Builder, and finally the North Coast Limited on the end. There's one of those slumber coaches breaking that nice green. And the tail end passing under the overpass. The NP dropped their observation cars off the North Coast Limited pretty early in the 60s. The Q owned one of them, so they took theirs and they painted it silver and they ran it on their own trains. And amazingly, of the 6 cars that were built for the North Coast Limited, the tail cars, all 6 of them still exist. And we've got one of them up here at the Lake Superior Railroad Museum. And a couple of them are in private ownership, but they all do still exist. Back at Dayton's Bluff again with the long combined train. This is later in the 60s. We've got Big Sky Blue showing up back there, and GN RPOs running through this day. Don't have an exact location on this photo, but this is between Newport and St. Croix Tower, most likely. And here we are arriving at Prairie du Chien. This is August 1968. And that brings us to the end here. This is one of the Q's calendar shots. I don't remember what year it is exactly, but this was during the 50s or 60s, I believe. This was a GP35, so this was right after the delivery of those. So they're advertising the Zephyr and the new locomotive power. So I'm pretty sure I have everybody listed here that provided pictures for this presentation. If I missed anybody, I do apologize. Let me know, and I will make sure that your name is added to here for future presentations. But I missed out on all of this. I was born way too late, so I'm very thankful that these folks turned their cameras on the Q so I could imagine what was. And then finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't put in a quick plug for the Burlington Route Historical Society. It's still near and dear to my heart. We've got multiple membership options. This is our website, burlingtonroute.org. And we do a spring meet, usually in the Chicago area, and a fall meet, which is usually a couple days. And those will travel around the system. But 2 publications. We put out the Burlington Bulletin that has been up to 3 times a year now. And then we've got the Zephyr, which went electronic a couple of years ago. That comes out 4 times a year. We also issue a calendar every year, and just random odds and ends aside from that. We just sent out a freight car roster book to members. That was a unexpected bonus for a lot of people. They weren't expecting that. So a lot of benefits to being a member, and we'd love to have you on board. It's a really fun organization. I'll go back to the credits here, and then if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Brian. And does anybody here in the room have any questions? Anybody here local in the room with any questions? Dave Nelson, come on up to the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Hi, this is Dave Nelson. The question is, do you know what the plans are for all those passenger cars in Charles City, Iowa?
Yes, they're actually working on starting a museum. Most of those cars are owned by a gentleman named Bob Moen, and there's a couple other privately owned cars there as well. But it's the American Passenger Train History Museum, and they just recently moved the former Milwaukee Road Depot about a block south to be on their property there. They own, or Bob Moen owns, the former Chicago City Western shops at Charles City, so they do passenger car work in there, but then they've got yard trackage there as well. So that they're trying to organize a museum, but they're a pretty small organization, and they're still trying to raise funds. But they've got some pretty ambitious goals.
Thank you for that, Brian. Anybody else here in the room have any questions? If not, I'll turn it over to anybody on the Zoom call. Have any questions or comments for Brian?
It looks like there was a question in the chat about the Grand Crossing shots. I'm trying to get back to that one here. Take a look. Yeah. It was, what was the second unit in the Grand Crossing shot? Looked yellow like UP or Milwaukee unit. And that's a deceiving photo. That is a Q unit, but the difference is the lead unit. Or I can put that picture back up here for a second. So the lead unit here has stainless steel side panels, but the second unit has painted side panels. So that's why the colors look different, and you've got the setting sun giving it that yellow glow there.
Thank you, and I see that Ed Kohler has a question.
I believe you were muted there.
Okay, not really a question, just a comment. I want to congratulate our presenter on a very well done presentation, great photos, and for Brian taking the time to put it together. And Mike, I thank you for scheduling it.
With members, he is now a member of the Wisconsin chapter. He's also a member, which is how I know him. Ed is a member of the Long Island Sunrise Trail chapter, but now has joined the Wisconsin chapter as well. If you have not joined, it's quite simple. Just go to www.nrhswis.org and click on the join button. It's real simple, as Fred Ryder can tell you as well. He did it today. Thank you, Fred. So any other questions from the Zoom before we adjourn for the evening?
Now you have 4 members
We
from
do
the
have
Long
an
Island Sunrise
option,
Trail
and
chapter.
There are a couple of chat members. Did you want to answer these questions, Brian?
Yeah, we got one that's, did the GN or NP engines ever run through to Chicago? On passenger trains, no, that didn't occur until the brief BN era. Sometimes the freight units did go through. It wasn't very common, but it did happen, but not with passenger power. And then, did the Q have a reason to run elephant style? That's a topic of hot debate every couple of years on the CB&Q email list. Some people thought that it was for maintenance purposes. You know, should you have one of your locomotives fail en route, then you can, just drop the lead unit that's not working and then have another forward-facing unit. Another theory was they were pointed in that direction for the commuter service in Chicago. All the Q's passenger power rotated between long distance service and commuter service, E8s and 9s. The E7s not so much, and the E5s didn't. They didn't transition very well for the passenger service. But yeah, definitely the E8s and 9s. So it's probably more so for that, because all your units at Chicago were going to be pointing the same direction, because by the late 60s, mid to late 60s, most of your commuter trains were push-pull at that point. So you had the locomotive on the west end of the train. So everything was facing west.
Hey, Brian, quick question. On the beginning of your show, you had like what I thought you called the EAs, or for lack of a better terminology for me, it was like a shovel nail version of the units. You had like a B unit behind there that was sort of a funky looking thing. What was that?
Yeah, that was one of the booster units. It was basically a B unit for those shovel nose units, and those were built for the Denver Zephyr, the longer train, and so they needed the single unit wasn't going to be enough, so they had a booster unit, and those ran in pairs. It was a Silver King and Silver Queen, with Silver Queen being the B unit, and Silver Knight and Silver Princess, with Princess being the booster unit. So it's basically an EA unit without a cab.
Did you have any photos of just those at all? I didn't see it if you had it in the program.
I didn't. Those didn't. The A units didn't really run on the Twin Cities line. They pretty much were captive to the Chicago-Denver main line. Looks like had another question come in on the combined trains. Were passengers free to roam the entire train? I don't believe so, but I don't know for sure. That's something I'd have to look into.